What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Sideline Sports. Hit the like, hit the subscribe. Today we're talking Warrior basketball, and luckily we have one of the best sportscasters in the Bay Area, I feel, and Dan Dibley here. We're going to talk a little bit about how we feel the Warriors are going to play in game two, takeaways from game one. And so thank you very much for being here, Dan. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, glad to be here. And man, this Warrior run, and I know it's only one game in, but it's a dynasty. And this year is kind of a continuation, hopefully, a continuation sensation, as we might say on our show. Willard and Dibbs, 2-6 on 95.7 the game. And hopefully game two goes well. But I do also think this series is going to be longer than maybe what game one would indicate.
Mm-hmm. Well, so that actually kind of makes me think a little bit. I wanted to ask you now, in my opinion, I kind of feel like when I look at the numbers here, and I'm not going to spout them off because I had them on my screen and now I don't, but the takeaway I had from game one was that anybody not named Steph Curry or Jimmy Butler didn't really have an outstanding game. Pajimski, I think, scored 14. That was pretty good. I'm good with Pajimski getting 14, 18, but the question in my mind is I kind of, or not even a question, it's just the hypothesis I have in my mind is that the Warriors might actually have a better game in game two if somebody else steps up, not named Curry or Butler, because they got through that game with only a couple of guys scoring in double digits. And that kind of is the theme of the Warriors season so far, I would say. But when somebody else not named Butler or Curry is on fire, they really can take over a game and they look so much more unbeatable. So if the defense stays pat like they did in game one, don't you feel like maybe there's that possibility that they can take game two and maybe they don't take the night off and wait for the home game?
Yeah, there's a chance of that, obviously. And I do think that Vegas would indicate that Houston is a slight favorite in this game. And it's hard to parse between good defense and bad offense. But I look at game one and I look at what Houston did from behind the 3-point line, and they shot 20.7% from three. And if you look at all the threes they took and all the threes they missed, excuse me, a lot of them were open threes. And Fred VanVleet was bad, and he's been bad against the Warriors almost all year. Jalen Green was neutralized, and the Rockets had no real offense in the half court. And I do think that that is going to be something that's going to be a trend throughout the series because the Rockets in the half court are not a good offense, and the Warriors defensively in the half court are a good defense. Now, your other point about the role players tend to play better at home than they do on the road, and this is an NBA historical reality. So Pods, I don't know if Pods is really a role player anymore. I think he's kind of emerging into more than that. But Moses Moody, he didn't make a shot until the fourth quarter. Then he hit a big mid range and he hit the big corner three. Those shots were critical for them to go on and win. Quentin Post was, kind of swimming in the deep water. And I
Yeah.
said that to Steve Kerr yesterday. We had him on the show, and Steve was kind of laughing. He's like, "Yeah, it was his first time, and he was in the deep water." And so Quentin, as a rookie, is going to have to kind of go through it. Buddy Hield is still hit and miss, and more miss than hit. And so as you go through the rotational guys, to expect them to really step up in game two, for me, feels like a big ask.
Yeah, and I think you're right because I think it's a big ask in any situation during the year. But so that was kind of where I wanted to go with the next question for you is that okay, who is that guy? Is it Pajimski? Is it Moody? So in my mind, and maybe not the most popular one, my mind, I'm thinking number one, I need to see something out of Moody. Anything out of Moody in the starting lineup, I think will help project this team towards a series win, and anything less than that might make it a little tougher, and maybe we'll go 6, 7 games. And maybe you're right. I feel like it could really go either way depending on how the outcome of this game tonight really goes. Because if the Warriors do steal the game tonight, I think it's going to be a quicker series than people. I mean, I think maybe a gentleman's sweep, maybe 5 games. If they lose, then yeah, I think we're kind of in it for the long haul, and it's very possible. You're right. These guys are young. Even Pajemski's only on his second year. I'm not expecting a lot out of him, but what I do see with Pajemski that is intriguing is that he's taking steps forward and he's becoming a better and better and smarter basketball player this year than he was last year. And it is kind of transitioning into the playoffs a little bit. He's not totally over his skis. And even when you look at Post, yeah, he was swimming in the deep end, but getting him I truly feel Post is the Warriors center of the future, the way that I've seen him play so far. Now that could change, but um, I guess I guess you kind of answered the question, which is like, who is this other guy that's going to kind of contribute just a little bit? And really, the answer is anybody can, if just as long as somebody does, right? As long as it's a collective effort, and Steph Curry doesn't get cold, and Jimmy Butler still is putting up the points he needs to put up. So I mean, I haven't seen yet, I don't think. Have we seen a game where Butler's really gone off and had like a 40 plus point game? I'm not sure if we've seen that yet. So that's still, I'm waiting for that.
Yeah, not against Houston. I do think that the Memphis game was one where Jimmy started to exert the playoff Jimmy kind of vibes. And, even if you look at this game and the game one, Jimmy Butler did enough and he did a lot to get buckets when they needed it. And, Steph Curry is going to have a hard time against Houston in this series because they're going to be dead set to try to limit him. And Amen Thompson was the Steph stopper. Remember the last game of the regular year where Steph went
Yes.
1 for 10 and he had 3 points, and everybody's saying, oh boy, Amen Thompson, watch out. And even if you look at game one and you watch the Steph Curry evolution, the first 3 shots he took were all threes and they were all misses. The next 5 shots he took were twos. And so he got off the line, he drove, he had a couple of mid-range, he had a couple of great layups, and he started to get himself into the flow. And then his last 3 shots were those threes, one from 35 feet. One was the last 3 he hit, which was a drive right. It was a chuck, but it's only a chuck for everybody other than Steph Curry.
Right.
And he drilled it. And so even though they did a good job against him defensively, he still had 31 points. So I think that part of it becomes difficult for Houston no matter what. Like, you could stop Steph Curry once, maybe once a month, maybe once a year, but you're not going to keep him totally contained throughout the course of any series. And Jimmy Butler has a unique ability to get to the foul line. So then it comes down to the others, Quentin and Buddy. And I thought GP2 was really solid with a couple of threes, couple of big baskets. And so for me, this series comes down to the big thing is that Houston can't really score. And I looked at all 6 games the Warriors played against Houston this year, and Houston did not shoot 50% from the floor in any one of those games. The one time they shot 48% was the last game in April where Houston won 106-96. They shot 48.4%. That was the game that Dylan Brooks was 10 of 13, which is spectacular.
Not like Dylan Brooks.
No, and he's had a good year, and he shot almost 40% from 3. He's a better shooter than Warrior fans want to accept, but
I accept that he's a good shooter. I just feel like whenever he's playing versus the Warriors, it seems like he's not at his best for whatever reason. Maybe he's pressing, but anyway, yeah.
Well, also because the Warriors are a good defensive team. And if you look at the metrics, they're number 1 in defensive rating since they acquired Jimmy Butler. So you do have 2 good defenses. And when push comes to shove, who has the better offense? And it's not even close. It's the Warriors.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you said it, you just said it. If as long as you can keep it to a half court game, I like the Warriors' chances as long as you're not letting the Rockets get off to any fast breaks. I did see the Rockets play. I think they put in 2 centers at one point, trying to, at one point in the game. I think that was in the second quarter, thinking that might slow the Warriors' offense down. And so I kind of wanted to get your take on that because when I'm watching that with my son actually, and he's like, "Oh man, Steph Curry's going to have a hard time scoring now." It's like, well, in my opinion, that's actually going to make the Rockets a little bit slower. And you could see Steph Curry got to the basket a little bit more when that happened. I mean, what changes do you think the Rockets can make to slow the Warriors offense down?
I think the only change that they could make, and I don't know if they'll make it in game 2, but I would go the other way and start to put in more shooting if I'm Houston, because, you could play Steven Adams, and they did, and he was great on the glass, and he got a lot of offensive rebounds. And, you can play Şengün, and you will, because he's probably Houston's best player. He's an all-star, and he's a guy who can get buckets. And, He dunks on Draymond early in that first quarter, and I'm thinking, uh-oh,
Yeah.
that wasn't good. And good for Draymond for going up and contesting. And I don't know if it was a full poster, it was probably a half poster, but the crowd's into it. And
Yeah.
here we go. It's Houston, and you're up 8. Great. Good for you, Houston. That was about the last high water mark in the series. But if I'm Ime Udoka, I'm thinking more about going the other way. And not that you're going to match small for small, but maybe you put in a little bit more shooting. I don't know if you can unearth the ghost of Jeff Green and put him out there at 37 or however old he is. But you've got other guys who've come on.
Yeah.
Holiday can shoot. Jock Landale can shoot a little bit. Maybe you go the other way and try to bring in some spread shooters, some guys who can actually help Houston in the half court. Because you look at game one, Houston had 22 offensive rebounds and they had 22 second chance points, which
Yeah.
means 22 times you got a rebound and you got 1 point per offensive rebound. That tells me that even though you got additional possessions, you still couldn't score.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's just it. I guess that's the scary part, I guess, if you're a Warrior fan, is that they dominated in the rebound section and still they didn't score, and that probably will change a little bit. But I do feel like if the Warriors just stick to playing defense, that they have a good shot at winning this thing. I mean, they shot 3-point percentage was good though. It was 37.5. Um, which is I don't know what their average is for the
That's about their
year,
average.
but
Yeah, that's right in there. It's
so
about, yeah.
so they're doing all right. Their field goals were 47%, really good. 36 for 76 field goals. So, I mean, overall, I would say I like the Warriors' chances here in game 2. I really do, but I do know that, like you said, some of the younger guys usually don't perform as well on the road, and getting that one win on the road is kind of a win for the Warriors. So I guess I'm just looking at this from a point of view of, if the Warriors are going to lose tonight, how are they going to lose? I just think the only way they lose is maybe turnovers, and that's what they got to limit. So
Yep.
maybe we go there and talk a little bit about Draymond holding onto the ball and using, I mean, making more intelligent passes. I know he's just throwing the ball out there like he's still got, Durant and Curry on the team, and then that pass is going to work. Or maybe he's getting older, and maybe he's not threading the needle as well as he usually does, and that goes for other players too. Curry didn't handle the ball in some situations in that game very well. So, I mean, how do you limit the turnovers is the main thing, especially against a good Rocket defense.
Well, I think you limit it by two things. One, avoiding the home run play. And Steve Kerr talked about it yesterday on our show, where you try to do too much with something that's not really there. And I know Buddy Hield didn't get credit for a turnover, but you've got a lead and you've got the ball, and he tries to throw a 45-foot alley oop to a cutting Jimmy Butler. And Jimmy did all he could to catch it and try to finish, and he got swatted. I think
Yeah.
it was Tari Eason at the cup. And that didn't go down as a turnover, but it might as well have been, because you put Jimmy in a terrible spot. And I'm remembering pods in the first quarter where he's top of the circle, left-hand dribble, and he tries to take the ball and do a hook pass entry to a cutter from 20 feet away. It was telegraphed. It was taken away. And those types of like forced turnovers where you're trying to do more than you really need to do, those are the ones they have to avoid. And obviously live ball turnovers, which, a turnover when they actually steal it and they can go the other way. That's where Houston can hit you offensively. If you get into a situation where even if you turn it over with the travel, well, that's dead ball. Now you can get back and set your defense. That's better than, giving it up in a live ball situation. And, Trevor, this year, when the Warriors have 20 or more turnovers in a game, they're 0-6. 2 of those games were against Houston.
Mhm.
So if you look at the high turnover games that they've had, when they've done it against the Rockets, they lose. When they've done it against anybody, they lose. And so that's where the Jimmy Butler effect has been so profound, because turnovers are down with Jimmy Butler. So if you just avoid the turnover part of it, and somewhat contain them on the offensive glass, then you're going to be in a position to still win.
Yeah, and that's why I guess my argument is I think the Warriors have a good chance of winning this game tonight. I really do, just because I don't think that they're going, like you said, the turnovers are down. I'm just analyzing the game and thinking to myself that the only way that the Warriors lose this game is turnovers or just turnovers because that allows for fast breaks. That allows for and or they get out rebounded and the Rockets start scoring. But the Rockets don't score well. So I guess the bottom line is that I'm looking at a couple of ways they could lose. A third way, maybe. Now this goes into my next question. A third way would be, are they going to get outcoached? And that's probably not going to happen. So the question is as this series goes along, won't the Warriors get stronger as Steve Kerr has more time to analyze how to use his rotations? It just seems like that's always the case with him. The Warriors nobody wants to see the Warriors in the playoffs for this exact reason. So trying to kind of understand why I'm trying to kind of analyze how the Warriors lose this game tonight if they do, because a lot of times they do, teams on the road in the playoffs lose a game. And so where's it going to happen at? Is there a chance that Steve Kerr maybe messes with the lineup and he gets a little bit too, how Steve Kerr can get. He can just start, messing with the lineup a little bit too much. So do you feel like that's a factor?
Yeah, I'm not too worried about that part of it. And if I look at the bones of this year and when Houston was able to win games, and you go back to the in-season tournament, the elimination game, which turned out to be one of the 5 times they played in the regular year, Houston wins 91-90. And in that game, there were 25 fouls called in totality on both teams, which is about 13 fouls fewer than the average in an NBA game. Your NBA average is about 38 fouls per game called. This one was 25. And the Warriors shot 9 free throws and the Rockets shot 10. So that tells me that the game was very, very loosely officiated in that they didn't call a lot of fouls. And if that's going to be the case, Steph Curry shot 1 free throw and he missed it, by the way, which is
Yeah, right.
shocking.
Yeah.
And I wonder
Yeah.
how many games he's ever played where he shot a free throw and didn't make a free throw. I'd have to Google that, and maybe I'll do that later for our show, Willard and Dibs 2 to 6 on
Yeah, I mean
95.7 The Game,
it's the
because
same thing. Sorry,
it's
go ahead.
rare that he
Yeah.
no, it's very rare that, like, if he gets 1 free throw in a game and a 91% career shooter, you would assume that he makes it, but he
Yep.
had 1 free throw and he missed it. So the anatomy of how Houston can win, they won 91-90 and the game was officiated that way. And I'm not going to blame the refs because I love the refs, but that is one way that they can win. And the other way they can win is by shooting the ball very, very well. And we mentioned the last game of the regular year, the Warriors were coming off a gauntlet of games and they were probably tired, not to make excuses, but Houston shot it great. The Warriors didn't shoot it great. And Houston was able to win that game. So if those are the two blueprints, can they do that 4 times? I don't see that.
No. And I don't either. And that's where it really all comes down to is how do you see how can I can't see the Warriors really dropping a game unless Houston is absolutely perfect in their shooting, and that only happens every so often. And I will say the Warriors were tired. There's no doubt about it. I It's not an excuse, but it is just what it is. And they were not playing at the top of their game the last time they saw the Rockets, meaning in the regular season, not last game. So yeah, the Rockets they were shooting abnormally well in that game, but the Warriors were exhausted after playing some pretty darn good teams prior to that. So I don't see that happening more than that's why I kind of when I look at this series and I think to myself, how many games is this series going to go? Why the number 5 comes up is that maybe that does happen in 1 out of 5 games. And so that's why I still feel like the Warriors can win this series. Um, but if they lose tonight, then because it's a home game with the Rockets, then yeah, I could see it going 6 games. I have a hard time seeing it go 7. I mean, do you think this is going 6, 7 games though?
I had it at 6 initially, and I'm going to stand behind it because I do think from the Rockets' perspective, and I was reading an article today from Logan Murdoch in The Ringer, and he gave a little bit of a glimpse behind the curtain with the Rockets and just exactly how they're thinking about the series and how they're going to approach it. And I do think that tonight is a game where they're going to muck it up even more. And I think if
Yeah.
you're Houston and you look at game one, you lose 95-85, and you think that's the kind of game that we need to win. They were plus 16 in rebounding, and it was a game where you were able to be aggressive. And, Steph Curry, he did have 31, but by and large, you did kind of what you wanted to do against him. He hit a couple of unbelievable threes.
Mhm.
And not that you'll take that because it's Steph and that's what he does, but, Jimmy Butler was somewhat contained. And you feel like if you're Houston, that Fred VanVleet and Jalen Green are going to be better than they were because they were so bad. They were so far below what they normally are. If you're Houston, you think, okay, let's be even a little bit more physical and let's try to do what we did and think that those shots are going to go in. And if they do go in, then we've got a better chance to win this game. So honestly, I look at game two if I'm Houston and I think it's not a must win, but it's about as close to a must win as possible because historically,
Yeah.
teams that lose game one and two at home in a best of seven, those teams are 4-24 in the series in totality. So if you're Houston, you know that the math and the odds are stacked against you. And of those four teams that actually won after being down 0-2, losing both games at home, those are all veteran teams. This
Yeah.
Houston team, by and large, is a very young team. So I can't see them going down 0-2 and beating the Warriors in 405. And honestly, they probably can't see that either. So they're going to approach this game tonight with a certain amount of desperation, which is why I think that, the Rockets are going to throw their best punch of the series tonight.
I agree with you, and I think that's going to come right out the bat. So that's why I feel like if the Warriors can withstand that first haymaker in the first quarter, going into the second quarter, and still keep the game close, I think that it could be in the Warriors' favor that way. One thing that I don't know if I'm concerned about it, but we do have older players, and if this series gets drug out to 6 or 7 games, how will that affect Draymond? How will that affect Curry? Are they going to be exhausted at that point? Are they going to be able to play at the top of their game? I don't have as much of a concern for Butler because it seems like he doesn't ever seem to run out of energy. So I don't see that with him. But do you see a point where Butler might have to take over a game or two if it gets deep in the series and these guys get just so exhausted they just can't give you 100% for a full game?
Maybe, but if you look at the way the series is laid out, you had the game on Sunday, and then you had 2 off days. You got a Wednesday, and then you've got 2 off days, and then you've got the Saturday. And I do know that the turnaround then would be Monday, and you start to get into every other day. I look at the way Steph Curry and Draymond, and this is why it's so critical that they beat Memphis, is they got a nice little 4-day break leading into the start of the series, and now you're getting a couple of days in between games. So even if tonight goes awry and you lose, and let's just say it's a tight game and Steph's got to play 36 and Draymond plays 36 and Jimmy's going to play 42 at
Yeah.
least because that's what he does. But
Yes.
I do think you start to get into a spot where Jonathan Kuminga might emerge in this series. And not that he's going to get back to 25 or 30 minutes, but when you start to think about how you would mitigate age in a series that maybe is getting longer. So let's think about the scenario of a Warrior loss. They lose tonight 99-95. It's close and everybody plays a lot of minutes. Well, now you get into game three and you start to think about Kuminga as a guy, and maybe you extend your rotation just a little bit to give some guys a little bit more of a breather.
Yeah, and it's funny. I was actually heading that direction with Kuminga, and I was going to ask you if you think he played his last game as a Warrior or not, because it seems as though, I mean, okay, my opinion on Kuminga is this. I've never looked at him as the next guy in line when Steph Curry leaves. I never thought of him as having the talent to really be the guy who leads a team. I do see him as a good number 2 or 3 guy, probably a good 3 guy. I know that as far as like his physical specimen goes, he's got all the talent in the world as far as his athletic ability. I just don't think it's ever transitioned over to basketball. You see this with players all the time in sports where they get drafted and they have an amazing body and they're just like, this guy's going to do it all. And then they get out on the field or out on the court and it doesn't transition they're, because that the game didn't come to them. They don't have that in them to be that player. And that's fine. But I, when I'm looking at Kuminga, the thing that's frustrating about me, and this is why I'm not really high on Kuminga, is that he's been with the team 4 years and he's young. I get it, he's still young, but he hasn't really taken steps forward. I've seen more steps taken forward with Pajemski than I have with Kuminga. And so I guess, do you think he's going to get any playing time? And like say for tonight, do you think Kuminga is going to get any playing time tonight, or do you think they're going to hold off until they really need him?
I think they'll hold off, but I do think that, what Steve Kerr said to us yesterday on the show is something that has to be taken to heart, which is, Jonathan needs to stay ready because you never know what will be needed or what will be called upon. And I think about how this game could go, and you may need an injection of somebody with some athleticism, even if it's 4 or 6 minutes in the first half and he plays well, and then you give him that same stint in the second half, because you have to look at the matchup. And, if you have Şengün and Steven Adams in there, do you want to go back with Kevon Looney? You're not going to play Trace Jackson Davis. I do think that he is far, far out of the rotation. So if you're playing Quentin Post and he again is looking like he's in the deep water, and, you figure out what you might want to do as far as a matchup and athleticism, maybe Kuminga gets a chance. But the challenge for JK is that Steve Kerr and the analytics show you that he doesn't play well with Jimmy Butler, and he doesn't play well with Jimmy and Draymond. And if Jimmy's going to play 42 minutes, well, then that leaves 6 minutes of non-Jimmy minutes to
Yeah.
play Kuminga. And a lot of those minutes also have Draymond in there. And as far as JK's development, I do think it's a little bit unfair because of the situation he's in. He's on a championship caliber team. And if you look at all the other guys in his draft class, Jalen Green, Houston's been terrible up until late last year and then this year. And so Jalen Green leads his draft class in minutes played because he was on a bad team. And
Yeah.
you look at, Wagner. And if you want to talk about Cade Cunningham got to play because Detroit was terrible. Now, these players are more polished than JK anyway. JK
Yeah.
never played college basketball. He played one league at G League Ignite, and then he got drafted on a team that was trying to win a championship. So those things make it so it's harder to develop. And I also think that the way Kuminga plays doesn't really jibe with the Warrior style of basketball.
I agree. The Warrior style of basketball is high energy, ball movement, constant movement around the court. It doesn't really, and again, it's not that I don't like Jonathan Kuminga or I think that he's a bad player. I think you hit it right on the head. I don't think he fits well in this offense for whatever reason, and I don't see him adapting to it either. I see him as a kind of player who we know who he is. We see what he goes downhill, he draws fouls, he gets a lot of buckets under the basket, but I don't see him as having a lot of tools in his tool belt as far as what he can do on the court. Like if he's having a bad night in one aspect, is he going to fall back to like taking three pointers if he can't get to the rim? Well, I mean he's okay, but he's not a three-point shooter, and his defense is okay, but not fantastic. But you're right. It's not fair to it may not be fair, but that is the NBA. It's not fair to criticize him and say, "Hey, you didn't have enough time," but that is where he ended up. I would have rather seen him just go down to the G League for a little while maybe and just maybe well, Warriors have never been great with player development. Let's not lie. Let's not kid ourselves here. It just isn't because they never had to. They've had the players on the court that they need to win championships,
Yeah.
and that would be an
See,
issue.
I disagree with that notion because, like, you look at Pods, for example, and
Well, true.
I mean, they've developed him, and Moses Moody, they gave him a $33 million extension over 3 years. And I mean, he's developed. And, Kuminga, I do think has developed somewhat, but it's tough because Jimmy Butler came in and Jimmy does a lot of the things that Jonathan Kuminga would do, which is
He took
ISO
his
ball,
position. He took his
get to the
spot.
rim.
I
Yeah.
get it.
He took a
Yeah,
spot, and also, I mean, Jimmy Butler is one of the best ISO players in the league, and Kuminga's not a big player movement, ball movement guy, and
yeah,
maybe someday he will be. And you look at some of Kuminga's games, and I'm looking at the Houston matchups. Game 2 against Houston, no Curry, no Draymond. JK had 33 on 13 of 22, and the Warriors won that game. So
mhm,
without JK in that game, they don't beat Houston, but they didn't have Curry and Draymond, so he needed to do more. And
yeah.
since Jimmy's come in, you've needed him to do less. And if you're looking for a do less ninth man, that's Guy Santos.
I like E Santos. He doesn't score a lot, but I love his intensity. I love how he attacks the ball. I love how he gives other teams fits all the time. And that's actually what I'm kind of seeing with Moses Moody as well, to be honest. I see a lot more physicality out of Moody than I've seen in probably his entire career. So giving him that contract, I thought was kind of a gamble, honestly, anyway. But I do see him progressing in a way. So Moody's so where do you see JK ending up then? I mean, I know I'm getting off the playoff
Right,
wagon
right.
here and start talking about other players, but everybody talks about him all the time, and I'm just like, do you see him as a Warrior long term, or do you think he may end up on another team just solely because he just doesn't fit with the offense, not because he's not a good player, but just that he just doesn't jive with the team that well?
Yeah, I see him actually going to another team in the offseason because of what you're saying. And you've got this year and two more of Jimmy, Steph, and Draymond. And unless you decide you want to try to trade Jimmy, which I don't know if that's tradable or even if you would want to, but if you just think about it in terms of Steph, Jimmy, and Draymond the rest of this year and then two more, and Kuminga not fitting with that core, what are you going to do? Are you going to pay Jonathan 4 years and 100 million, and 2 years of that's going to be this, where JK doesn't
Yeah.
really fit and he doesn't play in the high leverage games? Or do you just say, look, I mean, you have to admit that not that JK is a bad player, because I do think that he's a good player. I don't think he's an all star. I
Yeah.
think that he can go out there and be 15 to 22 a night for a team and maybe grow into being a very good player. But
Hmm.
it's about right now. And if we're all trying to maximize the Steph Curry window, you're better off with giving GP2 $6 million and Kevon Looney 7 million than you are giving JK 20 or 25. And so I do think that in the offseason, you're going to have to just swallow hard and have
Yeah.
him go play elsewhere.
Yeah, but you know what's kind of great about that? There is opportunity to get a shooting forward or somebody, a point guard, not necessarily point guard, but somebody, a shooting guard, somebody who can shoot consistently. Because this team, the one thing, obviously, not the one thing, but a thing is that they're not very consistent if your name's not Steph Curry or Jimmy Butler. So trading trading Kuminga for somebody who can be more consistent at the shooting guard position is not such a crazy idea anyway. Um, so I mean, I guess I'm on board with that. So I guess I mean I think we've talked about pretty much everything I can think of with the Rockets. So
Yep.
do you see who do you see the Warriors before we end this? Because I just would like to know what your thoughts are. Um, if we get past the Rockets or when we get past the Rockets, who you'd rather the Warriors face, whether it be like Minnesota or the Lakers, who do you think they match up against better? And how do you think the Warriors might fare in a series like that?
I think they fare well against either. The Lakers, for me, is a team that you've had a tougher time with, but I just look at their trajectory, and LeBron is still great, but at 40, I think that he's starting to slow down a little bit in these playoffs. Minnesota is a scary one for me because of their size, and we've talked about the size of Houston and what a problem that's posed, and Anthony Edwards, volatile, yes, but he's a tough, tough cover. I would rather face the Lakers, and I think the league would rather have that as well.
Yeah, and so I feel like that's probably where it's going to. I'm looking at like I'm watching the Lakers game last night, and even though they won that game, I don't know what it is about Luca lately that I'm looking at. He does look out of shape to me. I mean,
Yeah,
he doesn't look right. Is so I think I would rather face the Lakers because I think the Warriors could probably outrun them. Um, that's how I feel. And I think the Warriors have a better bench, and I think they got a better starting five overall.
yep.
So yeah, I mean, I would much rather see the Lakers than Minnesota. But I think I guess as crazy as it sounds, and none of us probably thought that the Warriors would have won the last championship that they when they won. I think they were kind of a dark horse in that particular playoffs when they beat the Celtics as well. But it in some ways kind of feels like that same vibe. I mean, we don't have a standout. The only thing I don't see yet, and I'm waiting for that to emerge, is we don't have like one of the bench guys or somebody not named Steph Curry or Butler really peaking right now. But if that happens, I feel like this could be another one. And I know it sounds crazy, but I think the Warriors match up against the Thunder. When I watch the Warriors play the Thunder, I think the Warriors match up well against the Thunder actually. So I wouldn't count them out of that series. I know I've heard did you guys talk about that yesterday a little bit? I think you talked about that maybe a little bit yesterday. I can't remember. I heard a little bit, but not everything. So I think there was a conversation around, hey, if the Warriors can get to a finals versus the Thunder, that's, you can sit back and you can say, okay, where are we at? Can we win this series kind of thing? I still think the Warriors have a really good opportunity to beat the Thunder. I feel that way because of the way they play versus the Thunder. I don't know what their record is against the Thunder this year. I know they played them a couple times. I think we got one win at least.
Yeah, I think it was 2 out of 3 against the
Yeah.
Thunder.
So I mean, I like our chances against the East Coast teams. It's just how do we get through this gauntlet? I mean, the Clippers are a scary team. I'd rather see them lose that
Yeah. Oh
series.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the team. That's the team that I think could halt it all real quick is the Clippers if they have to if the Warriors have to play them. Um, so that's a conversation for another time when we get there though.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So well, Dan, I really appreciate you coming on the show, man. I'm going to be posting it live soon. So you guys out there, everybody out there that's watching my podcast, will get this soon. Dan Dibley, 5 to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. Listen to him on
2 to 6
90.7 The
p.m. 2
Game.
to 6.
Two to
Yeah.
six. Sorry,
Yeah.
2 to 6 Monday through Friday. Listen to him every day you can on 95.7 The Game. Man, I was watching you. I remember watching you when I would come home from like I think I was in high school at the time, but I
Oh
remember
God.
watching you on KMBR when you were with Gary Radnich and you were
Yep.
kind of making dropping dimes in the background, kind of like
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So it's man, I've been watching you for a long time and it's awesome to be able to get actually talk to you
Yeah.
and yeah, it's cool, man. So
No problem. And congrats on your podcast. And
thank you.
man, you are relentless. You've been like tracking me down for months. I got to tip the cap because
Dude, I when I
normally,
see something,
yeah,
I go for it, man.
dude.
And
And I mean,
just
you like 5 and 6 and 7 times, and it's like, okay, Trevor, okay, you
yeah,
win. I'll do it. Let's
yeah.
go.
That's usually how it works in my life. I just keep going until I get a
Yeah,
yes. But
attaboy. Good
I don't
job.
want to use the word stalker. I'm not gonna use
No, no,
the
no. I
word.
use the word relentless, which is a great
Yeah.
quality in anybody. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, that's how I got. I mean, luckily, I had Guru respond to me, and I think that helped to get some sort of um, validity in my
Yeah. Yeah.
podcast, and that it
Yeah.
wasn't, it wasn't just some crazy person trying to get you on a podcast, So once I got
Yeah.
that, and then Steinmetz decided to come on, I could kind of get the ball rolling. And so my hope is that I can have you guys come back as returning guests,
Yeah.
and
Oh
we can
yeah.
talk more sports, and I can keep growing the channel. I mean, right now, it's still young. I've been doing this maybe 7 months now, not a long time. But it's something that I love to do, and I've played sports and been a part of sports my entire life,
Nice.
and so finally I'm getting a chance to kind of do something. If I can't play it, I'll